The U.S. trade war with China is a set of tariffs and restrictions imposed by the U.S. government on Chinese businesses. The original goal was to try to slow down China's economic progress. However, in reality, the situation has had the opposite effect. Trade disagreements have led to higher tariffs, policy uncertainty, and a reconfiguration of global supply chains. All of these have exacerbated economic risks. These changes have slowed U.S. GDP growth, reduced consumer and business confidence, and increased costs for companies. The effects have been particularly pronounced in sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing. Higher transaction costs have caused higher prices for consumers, reduced business investment, and increased financial instability. Financial institutions faced increased credit risks and possible defaults, especially smaller banks with significant exposure to the affected industries. In addition, the trade war has triggered shifts in global financial practices, including a trend toward dollarization, which may further weaken the U.S. banking industry. In this article, we will analyze in detail the impact of the U.S. trade war with China on various sectors and explore the potential implications for the U.S. economy. The mutual escalation of tariffs between the U.S. and China has resulted in significant economic disruption. By the end of 2019, the U.S. imposed duties on about $350 billion worth of Chinese imports, and China responded with tariffs on $100 billion of U.S. exports. These tariffs increased the cost of imported goods, translating into higher prices for consumers and higher operating costs for companies dependent on these imports. Higher duties on Chinese goods have raised the prices of consumer goods. The tariffs are estimated to cost the average American household an additional $831 per year. Higher costs and uncertainty have led to lower business investment. Investment growth slowed to 2.3% in 2019 as companies postponed or scaled back their expansion plans due to trade uncertainty. As businesses face higher costs and reduced profitability, their ability to repay loans is reduced, increasing the likelihood of defaults. This is particularly critical for small banks, which have a large portion of their loan portfolio concentrated in the sectors most affected by the trade war, such as manufacturing and agriculture. The agricultural sector has been hit hard as U.S. farm exports to China declined by nearly 20% between 2017 and 2018, significantly impacting farmers' incomes and ability to service loans. Commercial real estate, already under pressure due to high vacancy rates and the shift to remote work, faces additional stress as companies cut back on investment and expansion due to higher costs and reduced demand. The trade war has also contributed to slower economic growth. U.S. GDP growth fell by about 20% between 2017 and 2018, in part due to reduced business investment and consumer purchasing power. This slowdown in the economy could weaken the financial health of banks by reducing loan demand and increasing the likelihood of defaults. The trade war has caused significant swings in financial markets. For example, news related to the trade war has consistently affected the Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index, VAX, with spikes in implied volatility causing spreads of high-yield bonds to widen and stock prices to fluctuate. A study by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston found that news of the trade war widened high-yield bond spreads by up to 34 basis points in 2018 and 13 basis points in 2019. The trade war also caused significant swings in the yield curve in 2019, contributing to its flattening and movements in the S&P 500 index. Banks typically hold mixed investment portfolios, including government securities and corporate bonds. Volatility caused by a trade war can lead to large swings in the value of these assets. For example, higher tariffs on imported goods increase production costs for companies, reducing their profitability and potentially increasing the likelihood of defaults on corporate bonds held in banks' portfolios. In addition, rising costs and uncertainty could reduce consumer confidence and reduce borrowing, further undermining banks' financial stability. The trade war has led to increased policy uncertainty, causing many companies to postpone or reduce capital investments. According to the World Bank, the trade war has reduced investment growth in the U.S. by 0.3 percentage points by the end of 2019, and a further decline is expected. This slowdown in business investment could dampen economic growth by reducing demand for credit and increasing the likelihood of loan defaults, which will particularly affect smaller banks with less diversified portfolios. Uncertainty due to the trade war has undermined consumer and business confidence. Companies, faced with higher costs and uncertain future prospects, are less inclined to invest in expansion, which could lead to a reduction in borrowing. Consumers, fearing potential economic instability, may reduce some of their investments. The trade war has caused significant uncertainty for companies with global production networks. Escalating tariffs, regulatory barriers, and other non-tariff restrictions have forced businesses to adapt their supply chains, often moving production facilities or exploring alternative source countries. For example, the U.S. raised tariffs on $350 billion worth of Chinese imports, forcing companies to shift production to other regions to avoid these costs. This has increased operating costs and process complexity, disrupting financial planning and the stability of businesses dependent on global supply chains. Banks significantly involved in sectors hit hard by the trade war, such as manufacturing and technology, may experience increased credit risks. The National Bureau of Economic Research noted that firms with export dependence on China have experienced declines in revenues, profits, and productive assets since the trade war began. This increased financial stress for firms could lead to higher loan default rates, directly affecting the financial health of banks with large loan portfolios in these sectors. The U.S. trade war with China has had a significant impact on U.S. farmers and manufacturers, which in turn affects the financial strength of banks, especially small and regional banks. Farmers have been hit hard as U.S. agricultural exports, especially soybeans and pork, have declined sharply due to retaliatory duties imposed by China. For example, U.S. soybean exports to China fell 80% from the average of the previous 3 years, causing farmers' incomes to plummet. The USDA reported that retaliatory tariffs reduced U.S. agricultural exports by $27 billion from mid-2018 through the end of 2019, with soybeans accounting for 71% of the decline. Financial difficulties could lead to higher default rates on loans made by regional banks. Farmers in particular have experienced significant financial stress, increasing the risk of bankruptcies and defaults on agricultural loans. The manufacturing sector faced similar declines in revenues and profitability, which also increased the risk of defaults on commercial loans. Rising tariffs on Chinese products have raised production costs for U.S. businesses. This has led to falling profitability and slower investment. Moody's analysts estimated that the trade war cost the U.S. economy about 300,000 jobs and reduced real GDP by about 0.3%. De-dollarization, or the process of countries reducing their dependence on the U.S. dollar for global trade and finance, could seriously affect the U.S. banking sector. Countries like China and Russia have been actively advocating the abandonment of the U.S. dollar and measures to relieve sanctions pressure. This has already resulted in serious financial losses and support for labor unions. However, the dollar remains one of the most stable currencies for China and the world's leading reserve currency. That is why the U.S. still expects high returns on investments in dollar assets. Nevertheless, a decline in dollar dominance could undermine the stability of U.S. financial institutions, leading to higher borrowing costs and further narrowing interest rate spreads. This would potentially exacerbate financial stress at U.S. banks already under pressure from distressed commercial real estate loans and rising interest rates. Thus, the trade war between the U.S. and China affects many areas of the U.S. economy, creating additional risks and instability. Reciprocal tariff restrictions have increased costs for businesses and consumers, slowed investment, and weakened confidence in financial markets. Critical sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and real estate are experiencing severe difficulties. Companies are being forced to restructure global supply chains at additional cost. Regional banks are particularly vulnerable due to the concentration of loan portfolios in the affected sectors. At the same time, the threat of de-dollarization may further complicate the situation of American financial institutions. Uncertainty is increasing, and further escalation of the trade conflict threatens to continue the negative consequences for the U.S. economy as a whole. Despite the severity of the challenges, there is hope that the parties can eventually reach an agreement that will reduce tensions and stabilize the situation. However, until this protracted trade dispute is resolved, U.S. companies and banks will need to be vigilant and flexible in their risk management. Thank you for watching this video. I hope the information presented was useful and interesting. If you found the content of the video valuable, please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Your activity is very important for our further development. I wish you good mood and success in all your endeavors. See you soon.